host for the day, take immense pleasure in welcoming you all to the third day of our 3-week faculty development program. Let me welcome you all with an inspiring quote. Surround yourselves with the dreamers and the doers, the believers and the thinkers. But most of all, surround yourself with those who see greatness within you, even when you don't see it yourself. The topic for today's faculty development program is Learning Outcomes and Pandemic Relearning Challenges in Outcome-Based Education. And I'm delighted and feel privileged and honored to welcome and introduce our speaker of the day, Dr. Prantik Banerjee, who is an associate professor in the Department of English and a former IQAC coordinator from Hislop College, Nagpur. Sir's achievements and accomplishments speak volumes about his stature, and it will be an honor to listen to him. Sir has successfully guided his college in getting A grade from NAC Bangalore and heritage status from UGC New Delhi. His areas of interest are cultural studies, film theory, medical humanities, post-colonial studies, trauma theory, gerontology, and disability studies. He is also interested in higher education policies, quality assurance frameworks, and curriculum designing. Sir has been a keynote speaker and a resource person at several international and national conferences. He has delivered the annual endowment lecture at Loyola College, Chennai, Jyoti Nivas College, Bangalore, and the Royal Bhutan University. He is a member of the Board of Studies, RTM Nagpur University. Sir has recently contributed in designing the new RTM-NU syllabus for BA. Sir drafted the syllabi for MA elective courses in cultural studies, trauma studies, and disability studies, which have been approved by the university for the implement from the current academic session. Sir has been appointed as an external expert to the Board of Studies, Vijay Vaze Autonomous College, Mumbai, from the session 2020-2021. He is a PhD supervisor for RTMNU and an examiner for San Garge Baba Amravati University and Bharatidasan University, Tamil Nadu. Sir was invited as an expert on the drafting committee of NCCI's National Higher Education Policy. He has also edited the Kakodkar Committee report of the prestigious National Institute of Technologies, NITs. He prepared and presented the triennial conference statement of Aishe at Christ University, Bangalore. He is a NAC expert and a RUSA trainer and has conducted many training programs for colleges and universities in India. Sir is an external advisor for IQAC of reputed colleges and universities and empaneled as a national faculty trainer for Aishe New Delhi. Sir was also invited as an expert on the selection committee for appointment of lecturers by St. Stephen's College, New Delhi, and Xavier's College, Mumbai. He is a certified HRD trainer from TCS Bangalore and has conducted several teacher and corporate training programs. Sir is on the editorial board of several international and national journals on higher education as well as English studies. His publications include 1 book, 3 anthologies, 7 book chapters, and 38 research papers in peer-reviewed journals. Sir is a published poet and a short story writer. Before moving forward, I request our viewers to post their questions in the YouTube channel and the Google Meet chat box in the preceding talk, which will be addressed by Sir later. Now, I'm sure the audience is anticipating the best outcome from today's talk, and we all will be persuaded and motivated by Sir's talk. So let us all prepare ourselves to get rejuvenated with the resounding knowledge of Sir as he caters to us an intellectual feast. So I now request Sir to take over the proceedings. Over to you, Sir.
Thank you so much, Sonika.
Yes.
First of all, the question of the millennium. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Um, Thank you so much for that introduction, and it's always a pleasure. The more perhaps the most significant thing about today's I being joining you through a virtual platform on this faculty development program is the fact that SFS College is my alma mater. So there is more than there is more than a connection of the mind, but also a connection of the heart. And it's always a pleasure and as well as an honor for me to be with SFS at all times, even though today I'm connecting with you all on a virtual platform. Uh, I think what I'm going to do with you today is take you through the topic of my talk, which is learning outcomes and pandemic relearning, challenges in outcome-based education. And friends, that is, I can see that there are already 72 participants who are connected on this platform, and I'm sure there are plenty more. But at the outset, before I start with my talk, with my with the subject of my talk, I'd like to also acknowledge and express my gratitude to Dr. Katie Thomas, principal of SFS College, for giving me this opportunity to articulate some of my thoughts and some of my views on what perhaps has been a topic that has engaged all of us teachers right through right in the past 6 or 7 months. Um, what I propose to do in my talk today with you all is perhaps take you through 4 or 5 major points, talking points. I wish to look at the way in which the COVID-19 crisis has been a game changer, how it has brought about a paradigm shift in the way in which we have been conducting, the way we have been transacting our curriculum in the past 6 or 7 months. Uh, I would like to highlight what, according to me, are some 3 or 4 major shifts in the teaching and learning processes that have taken place. Um, Also, I would like to correlate the major shifts that have taken place in our education ecosystem with some of the policy framework that has been outlined by the National Education Policy 2020, as well as try and try and configure my thoughts and ideas on our current teaching learning processes with what is mandated by assessment and accreditation agencies such as NAC as well as NBA. The third major point that I wish to cover in my topic is the focus of my topic, the central subject of my talk, and that is um, give to you some of the salient features of outcome-based education, its characteristics, its premises, and then quickly perhaps move on to the specificities of what are learning outcomes and how we can make effective, clear, and cogent statements of learning outcomes. And maybe if time permits, then briefly touch upon curriculum mapping and then take your questions. So this is the framework, or this is the outline of my talk, covering. Hopefully, I'll be able to cover the most of the points that I propose to place before you. But before that, I think the more important thing is this: what I call the tipping point. The tipping point from Malcolm Gladwell's best-selling book, where he talks about how big things always depend upon the smallest and what seems to be the most insignificant things. So let me share the screen with you first before I move on to the main subject of my talk. So this is, ladies and gentlemen, this is the tipping point. I hope my screen is now visible.
Yes, sir, visible.
Wonderful. Okay. So we've passed the test of the tipping point. And like I said, as Malcolm Gladwell's theory about how, big things depend upon small little measures, small little steps, we have passed the first test. And often, uh, while in the past 7 or 8 months, what we have been seeing is how important and sometimes how crucial it is that when we have faculty development programs or when we have webinars, perhaps internet protocols have become more important or perhaps equally important than program protocols. And therefore, I call this moment, this millisecond where the resource person is trying to present his screen sharing his screen as the tipping point, because everything else that follows depends upon this small little step. So I'm glad that things have fallen in place. And so let me quickly jump into my talk. And I give you a moment to look at this slide. Friends and dear participants, look again at all the spaces. Look at the slides and look at all the spaces that we were so used to 8 months back. The classrooms, the laboratories, the learning resource center, the playgrounds, the sports field, the canteen and cafeteria, the auditoriums. All of these in the past 8 months or so have been emptied out and silenced by a deadly, dangerous, self-mutating virus. And clearly, surely, the COVID-19 virus has created an unprecedented disruption in the landscape of higher education, both globally as well as in India. It has brought about a cascade of unimaginable disruptions. In our own country, schools and colleges were shut down in the second week of March as a preventive measure to contain the spread of COVID-19. Now it's December, and we are still debating whether to reopen our colleges and universities. Friends, apart from, impacting the future of 32 crore young Indian students, this crisis has also pushed educators to rethink and reshape the way we teach, the way we evaluate, the way we deliver the curriculum. And the COVID-19 has brought about, as I said, a huge paradigm shift in our entire education ecosystem. We've taken some immediate steps, in order to tackle the COVID-19 crisis. That is, we meaning we as educators, we have responded to the pandemic by shifting our teaching process online on an untested and unprecedented scale. We have online assessments on a trial and error basis. We have created content that is suitable for remote learning using technology and tools. And these have been some of the immediate measures that the teaching fraternity, we as educators, have taken in the past few months. However, this transition, this abrupt, sudden, and unexpected transition of teaching learning from face-to-face mode to an online mode has also thrown up a lot of challenges. And these are challenges that we are facing almost every day. Challenges that include, for example, limited access to the internet, both for teachers as well as students, then the lack of uninterrupted power supply, ill-equipped and unprepared teachers as digital trainers, absence of a robust monitoring method, and the considerable loss of rapport. And this, I think, is more important. The considerable loss of rapport between teacher and students in an online world, the increase in screen time, and besides, of course, the digital stress and psychological burnout that both teachers and students are undergoing. there has been, as I said, these and many other things that we have experienced and we have witnessed in the past 6 or 7 months has completely changed the landscape of higher education in India. However, I mean, while the pandemic has certainly brought about a cascade, a cluster of changes, some of which have been negative, but there have also been some positive changes. Unwittingly, the COVID-19 crisis has done something that that has been almost, that was inconceivable or that was unimaginable in 2019. And among the few positive things that it has done is that this crisis has in a sense fast-tracked the transformation or the transition of our education system from education 2.0 to education 3.0. I mean, when we talk about the evolution of higher education system in our own country, well, we broadly prepare a timeline where till the 1980s, the chalk and talk, the traditional method of delivering classroom teaching, the chalk and talk method was the predominant mode of teaching and learning for our students. In post-1980s, when computers began to enter into the education field, then computer-assisted teaching, or what we called CAT, played a major role, and we began to embrace technology in gradual steps. So that created a whole new model of delivering education, which was called Education 2.0. But what the pandemic has done is has accelerated this shift from Education 2.0 to Education 3.0. So what is really Education 3.0? It's a term that many of us may already be familiar. It is also a paradigm, or it is also a model that we have been practicing, we have been applying since the 1990s and the turn of the millennium. Education 3.0 is a broad blanket term. It's an umbrella term that is used by educational theorists, to describe the seamless integration of technology into learning. It also denotes, a blend of neuroscience and cognitive psychology with education technology. And it's practices and processes, that highlight Education 3.0. They are primarily driven by the extensive use of web-based digital and mobile technology, including apps, hardware, and software. So to put it simply, Education 3.0 denotes anything with an E in front of it. I remember, back in the 1990s, when computer technology was changing the way in which we were earlier used to teaching. Back then in the 1990s, in the late 1990s, the British Council, then Bombay, conducted a teacher training program, and we were participants, or I was a participant in that program. And one of the first things that the program facilitator from British Council said, he said, he opened his training session by saying that, ladies and gentlemen, we were a batch of about 50 odd teachers selected from different parts of the country. And he said, ladies and gentlemen, before I even begin today's session, let me make it clear that, as teachers, you are either with technology or you are in the way of technology. You are either with technology or you are in the way of technology. Well, that seems now ancient history. And like I said, one of the positive effects, one of the cascading effects of the virus, the COVID-19, has been to completely reorient, completely reboot our pedagogy, our education pedagogy, by making us embrace willy-nilly, wittingly or unwittingly, the technology-enabled, or what is called the ICT-enabled education. Friends, this shift from Education 2.0 to 3.0, as I said, I see three major shifts which we are already experiencing, which we are already applying, but will change the direction of the future of higher education. When I say future, meaning it's already happening. But I see three major shifts. One is, um, the first is the obvious one, the increasing use of technology, as I have been telling you. Apps and platforms such as this particular Google Meet that we are doing today have facilitated the live streaming of instructions from a single point of delivery to an extraordinary number of learners previously thought inconceivable. I mean, just take a look at how many participants, how many participants are connected through the Google platform today. So while COVID-19, initially made us teachers press perhaps the panic button, what we have done in a remarkably short period of time, as teachers, what we have done is we have learned to curate teaching material. We have upgraded our online teaching instruction skills, and we have made learning available to students confined and completely isolated to their homes. In other words, we have rebooted the entire pedagogy to make remote learning accessible from anywhere, anytime. I thought I'll mention this because, sometimes when we talk about technology and the radical shifts that it brings in all our systems, whether it is societal system or whether it is our educational system, uh, you know, I'd like you to watch a documentary after the session, of course, maybe called "The Hole in the Wall." Uh, this was an experiment that was conducted by a computer scientist as well as an education theorist named Sugata Mitra in the 1990s. And what this experiment really was, that Mitra, who was then working, he had his office in Delhi near Kalkaji, and he would often watch from his office cabin. He would watch his office cabin overlooked, a slum, and he would often watch the kids, the children of the slum, whiling away their time just playing, and wondered whether they even go to school or whether their parents have enough money to send them to schools. So, you know. Thinking about what he possibly could do for the children of the Basti, what he did was that because his office building shared a common wall with the slums, one fine day he simply made a hole in that wall and put a computer, as you can see the middle image, the image in the center of the slide. He put a computer with a keyboard, of course, facing the slum, and then. What followed, he observed what followed in the next couple of weeks. And amazingly, he found that more and more of those kids from the Basti who had absolutely no knowledge of computers, who had never seen a computer, automatically being drawn to the computer, and not just drawn to the computer, but operating the computer in an untutored, unregulated, unsupervised environment and learning a lot of things. In fact, he even watched to his amazement, he watched some of the students actually taking down notes. What started out as a small experiment in bringing learning to poor, underprivileged, or socially and economically disadvantaged children, one for Sugata Mitra, a TEDx grant, running in, a handsome TEDx grant of $1 billion or so. And in the next 2 decades, he has played a huge role in, in bringing technology to school learning. And if you watch this documentary called The Hole in the Wall, also another documentary on YouTube, which is available, called The School in the Cloud, particularly the TEDx, The School in the Cloud is a TED talk that he gave in the late 2000s, that is at the turn of the millennium, where he was predicting the future of schooling globally. And for him, his prediction was that in the next 20 years or so, what we understand as school, the physical school, a school of walls, bricks, and mortar, will very soon be transformed into a cloud school. the, as a platform, I mean, as a platform, as a digital platform. What seemed to be a kind of a utopian, a kind of a fantastic speculation on the part of Sugata Mitra is perhaps now turning into a reality. And this brings me to the second change that the pandemic or the COVID-19 has brought in our education sector, and that is that we are all, we have been increasing. There has been an increasing use of online tools and technologies to enhance the learning experience of our students. Yes, good content was already available since the 2000 for free in open access digital repositories such as SWAM and Diksha and ePathshala. These are UGC open repository, open access e-learning resources. So these were already there, but we teachers have also scrambled since March. We teachers have also scrambled to turn our teaching material into PPTs and videos. We have recorded our own lectures. We've also turned our course material into multimedia, animation presentations, etc. So we've all started to use more and more. Also, we have started to use more and more. Shift perhaps to the flipped mode of teaching, making way for the traditional chalk and talk method, as well as the blended learning. Maybe before the COVID-19, we were perhaps using more of the blended mode of teaching. But now that the fact that the COVID-19 has forced us to completely take the teaching learning experience or the teaching learning activity on online and on online platforms, perhaps we have now taken completely to the flipped mode of teaching. And by that, I mean, many of us as teachers, we've been making available our pre-lecture reading material to our students and turning the virtual classroom, whether it is a Google Classroom or a Zoom Classroom or a Microsoft Classroom, turning these multiple virtual platforms into live problem-solving sessions. If you sit back, if you pause for a minute and to think, that this has been such a huge transformation, the way we have taught and the way our students are learning, the way we are teaching and the way in which our students are learning. Yuval Noah Harari, many of you would be familiar with this name, Yuval Noah Harari, the best-selling writer of many books, but the one book that I would like to mention here is 21 Lessons for the 21st Century. And Yuval Harari predicts in that book, he predicts that in the near future, algorithms and data analytics will move education from 3.0 to 4.0. His prediction is that algorithms and data analytics will once again transform education, bringing in another major shift from 3.0 to 4.0. In other words, it will determine, algorithms and analytics will determine the way we produce, the way we disseminate, and the way we consume knowledge. Already, Google Map decides where we go. Netflix and Amazon Prime decides what we watch, and Amazon decides what we buy according to the algorithms of individual data. So it is not wild thinking on my part to predict that in future algorithms are also likely to decide what our students are going to study, how they are going to study, and where they're going to study. The third major shift that the COVID-19 has brought to the education system is that it has personalized and customized learning for the individual learner. The pandemic has, induced an online transaction of the curriculum. Um, it has now forced technology to drive pedagogy rather than the other way around, at least for the time being. And because instruction now is no longer limited by the clock or the academic calendar, think about what we have been doing or how we have been teaching our own academic and professional lives. Um, we have been catering to the needs of our individual learners. We are grading the learning material according to the levels and the degree of learning needed for our students, and our own routine, uh, pre-March or pre-COVID, which used to be physically taking classes 5 to 6 hours in college. Now we have become available to our students 24/7, and therefore our what we used to call work for home has completely changed to work from home. And therefore, even the boundaries of our workplaces as well as our personal spaces or our domestic spaces have become completely blurred. Friends, if doctors and nurses have been exemplary as COVID warriors in fighting the virus, yes, their efforts have been absolutely laudable, then I think we teachers have also been COVID torchbearers. And I say this with all modesty. And I'm speaking for the fraternity, for the teaching fraternity. That is, I'm speaking for all of us. And so my thought is that as if doctors and nurses have been exemplary as COVID warriors, we too have played a small part. We too have played not a small part, but we too have played a significant role as COVID torchbearers in helping students to continue with their education, to continue with their learning at remote places, ensuring that there is no discontinuity in their learning, despite the massive disruptions that we have experienced and we still are undergoing. As teachers, we have kept them engaged and connected to learning, even as they have remained, as I said, isolated, quarantined, or cooped up in their houses. And many of our own students, have been flung away in faraway villages. Remember, I say this, as I said, let me remind you, I say this with complete modesty. Because we must remember that the human development index of what we call of a country depends not only upon the fiscal health of the economy, but also on the physical and psychological health of its people, particularly the youth. And this is where, as a teaching community, we have been able to serve the nation. So while, all said and done, while it is true that, these would be, and these are the three major shifts in our from COVID, that the COVID-19 has brought from education 2.0 to education 3.0. Yes, as educators, we have tried our best in mitigating the extreme impact of COVID-19 crisis by switching over to online teaching on an unprecedented scale. It is equally true to remember that colleges and schools do much more than just deliver content and teach, whereas technology provides high-tech solutions to the delivery of the curriculum. I believe it is teachers who provide high touch in molding the minds and shaping the character of our students. And so the teacher's role, as a guide by the side of students, their ability to mentor and coach, their ability to inspire and motivate students is something that is difficult. I'm sure you would have found it difficult also to replicate in the online mode. What is also difficult to replicate is from the point of view of our students, what is also difficult to replicate is peer learning from their own classmates, participation in extracurricular activities and sports, experiential learning, and developing, their emotional quotient or the emotional intelligence, social intelligence, and leadership abilities. So these have been some of the limitations that we have faced. These are some of the challenges that we have faced in the new normal of higher education. What does it really mean when we are talking about, what our students have been learning? I think the COVID-19 also has brought into focus, more than any other time in recent years, the disconnect between what our students are learning and what the industry demands. If there have been every year employment index surveys suggest that our higher education system, despite all the new energizing vision of our NEP 2020. But if you're looking at the past performance of higher education in taking advantage of what we call the demographic dividend of our youth and preparing them into skilled, competent workers who will contribute meaningfully or significantly to the economy, I think higher education broadly has failed in that mission. And one of the reasons has been that the learning outcomes that we have anticipated as a system, as an education system, has not yet, there has been a complete mismatch between what the industry expects of its graduates and what higher education systems or education curriculums have been preparing them for. It is in this context, perhaps, that we are since the late 1990s, there has been talk of how higher education, our policymakers have been talking about how higher education needs to shift from an input-based model to an output-based model. And, there has been a lot of importance that has been given. Our national education policy, which mentions some of the drawbacks of the traditional education system and also suggests some solutions. One of the key problems, one of the key drawbacks that they identify, and I quote, is from the document prepared the document of NEP 2020, which says that among the major problems currently faced by higher education system in India, there is less emphasis in the development of cognitive skills and learning outcomes. Friends, learning outcomes or outcome-based education has already been a major game player or a game changer in the field of technical and professional courses or programs. It was way back in 1989 that AICT, signed what was called the Washington Accord and basically transformed the model or the paradigm of technical and engineering education by shifting from an input-based model to an outcome-oriented model, which they called outcome-based education. If you look at, I won't go into the details of it because of the time constraint, but quickly suggest to you that the significant change, the radical change that has taken place is that in the traditional model that we have continued to use even in present times, the focus and the emphasis of our education activities is basically on inputs, meaning staff, curriculum, physical facilities, etc., etc. And everything is patterned according to a pre-designed or a predetermined curriculum standard. On the other hand, the outcome-based education is different in laying emphasis on program outcomes, course outcomes, and also aligning them with our graduate attributes, what we call the 21st century skills and competencies that are required. Interestingly, unexpectedly, therefore, both our accrediting agencies such as NAC and NBA give a lot of weightage to the best practices that are adopted by HEIs in aligning their strategies for curriculum transaction with the attainment of learning outcomes by our students. I mean, NAC For example, one of its criterion 2, which is in teaching, learning, and evaluation, has a key indicator 2.6, which is all about student performance and learning outcomes, and it asks institutions to not only spell out the learning outcomes, but it also asks in a quality question or a subjective question. It actually asks higher education institutions to describe the mode and the mechanism by which the college and the institution ensures the attainment of these learning outcomes. There is also in the student satisfaction survey questionnaire, there's a question which asks students if they were informed by teachers in the class about course outcomes and program outcomes. Clearly, academic audit agencies and quality assurance agencies such as NAC and NBA mandate that higher education institutions bring more and more focus on learning outcomes and make learning outcomes the pivot, the fulcrum around which everything else, all our educational activities are revolve. This, friends, is the framework for outcome-based education, and I won't go into much detail, but you can see from that slide that outcome-based education basically focuses on an alignment of course outcomes with program outcomes with institutional outcomes, that is graduate attributes, and graduate attributes are also aligned with the overall institution's vision and mission. And you can also see on either side of the slide that that it involves the active and dynamic participation of all stakeholders, including feedback from alumni and industry. The most important thing to remember about the outcome-based education is that it is a student-centered learning philosophy whose primary focus is that learning outcomes should be what our students have learned and what they know, and what should be able to be empirically measured. So it is a system that measures outcomes rather than inputs. And this entire curriculum based on OBE is what is called designing back, because curriculum planning starts first with the identification and determination of learning outcomes at every level, at the unit level, at the course level, at the program level, and finally at the graduate outcome level. So learning outcomes, if you to put it very simply, are what students are capable of doing upon completion of a course or a program. So they define what learners are expected to know and can demonstrate in order to achieve the curricular expectations. The basic tenets of outcome-based education is to shift the focus of educational activity from teaching to learning, from information or knowledge gathering to thinking, critical thinking, from content to process, and from teacher instruction to student demonstration. So in OBE, you develop the curriculum from the outcomes you want students to demonstrate, rather than writing the learning objectives for the curriculum that is already there. This is the basic difference between the traditional educational system and the outcome-based education system. So like I said, OBE essentially is a curriculum, is an educational model which centers around what is called program education outcomes, program outcomes, and course outcomes, and they are aligned with the graduate attributes of your college or your institution, and how they are also aligned with the broader vision and mission of your college. If the OBE model centers on learning outcomes, and this is how we have been shifting progressively since the 2000, since in fact NAC also has come up with its revised curriculum, or rather its revised assessment methodology in August 2017. Uh, as I was telling you, AICT with NBA has already a clear, a clear methodology of measuring and assessing learning outcomes in engineering colleges, in management colleges, in colleges that run hotel and management courses, etc. But progressively, and very soon, probably, in the coming years, we all, even conventional colleges such as ours, multi-stream colleges, arts, science, and commerce colleges, which, they also will be roped in to follow the OBE system. The OBE system that we are following right now, non-technical, non-vocational colleges such as my college and SFSS, uh, we are partially following that model. Learning outcomes, yes, we have already integrated learning outcomes into our curriculum design and our curriculum delivery. But so far as attainment and assessment or the measurement of these learning outcomes, we still have to follow the NBA model, which basically gives you an assessment rubric. But that is not the focus of my talk. Normally, when I do a workshop in engineering and management colleges, it is spread over 2 or 3 sessions so that we are able to run the entire program step by step in a phased manner. And even the metrics and the rubrics can be demonstrated. Well, what really, if you look at learning objectives and student learning outcomes, well, we can always say that even traditional education systems had learning objectives. So what's the difference between learning outcomes and learning objectives? Quite often they are thought to be interchangeable, but they are not. To give you one small example, consider this FDP session, today's FDP session. My learning objective, the learning objective of the FDP session would be to make participants know and understand what are learning outcomes, or what are the characteristic features of an outcome-based education. On the other hand, what is the learning outcome of today's FDP session? It would be worthwhile if in this FDP session, participants were able to write at least 3 or 5 learning outcomes of the course or the program that they are teaching. So learning outcome is, learning objective is about intended results, whereas learning outcomes are achieved results. Learning objectives are expectations of a particular module, of a particular training session, whereas learning outcomes are learning that can be demonstrated. So the key to understand that learning outcome is different from learning objective because of 3 primary qualities, 3 chief qualities. One, that it is specific, it is measurable, and it is observable. And it should clearly indicate what a student or a participant such as you are should not only know, but should be able to do as a result of the learning activity that takes place in this FDP. Learning outcomes in the OBE model are often, abbreviated. They are symbolized with LO, and there can be a number of learning outcomes which are identified as LO1, LO2, LO3, etc., etc. Sometimes you will also find in OBE, certain OBE models, you will find ILO, the abbreviation ILO, which stands for intended learning outcome. Friends, why are learning outcomes so important? Well, in the OBE education model, it is important because it is the only way we can ascertain that our students have really learned. Because learning of the students is measured in terms of what they can apply, what they can demonstrate, what they can design, what they can create. And this brings me to many of us who have done, be it those of you who've done B.Ed courses or who are familiar with instructional pedagogy or educational pedagogy would remember Benjamin Bloom's taxonomy, which of course the model that I'm showing you on screen is a revised one. But clearly we need to understand that our own classrooms are a mixed bag. They often are a composite of students or learners with different learning abilities. And so what we wish to achieve in a classroom session of, let us say, 1 hour or 45 minutes, the course material, it is possible under OBE to design and teach a particular unit, a particular course, depending upon the learning outcomes for our students. So the 5 learning skills, the taxonomy that Bloom gives us, is, starting with what do we want our students to, let us say, learn? What should be the learning outcome of tomorrow's class that you probably will take in your college? Is it to remember? Do you want your students to remember? Do you want your students to understand? Well, if you want your students to understand, then at the end of that 45-minute or 48-minute period, they should be able to, look at the words, classify, describe, discuss. If you want your students at the end of a 48-minute class to apply what you have taught or what you have demonstrated, then students at the end of the class should also be able to illustrate, to interpret. Pay attention to the verbs that you find on the right-hand corner. If you want your learning outcome of a session to be analytical, then students should be able to compare and contrast, so on and so forth. Many of us are familiar with Bloom's taxonomy, but the question is that are we patterning? Are we calibrating our own teaching methodologies by taking into account what we want our students to achieve at the end of a classroom session? Often, out of the six learning levels that Bloom has identified, from 4 to 6, that is analysis, applying and analyzing, evaluating, and creating. These are considered to be the higher order thinking, and they are often called HOTS, which incidentally is very crucial, and this is what the industry expects from our graduating students. Notice also that there is a huge difference between learning objective and learning outcome. The one that I said, the learning objective of today's FDP, if I were to say, is to, for participants to know and understand what is OBE. The word know and understand is very general, and often such kind of learning is vague and difficult to measure. On the other hand, as I gave you the sentence, if participants at the end of the session were able to write 3 or 4 or 5 learning outcomes of a course that they are teaching, well, that is something that is observable, that is something demonstrable. So if I'm teaching English as a second language at the BA level at semester 1 or semester 2, then how do I design my learning outcome, which is a course outcome? At the end of perhaps one semester, these statements that you see on the slide are the ones that would suggest, that would spell out what the students should be able to do. They should be able to construct, that is, use verb forms. They should be able to evaluate parts of speech. They should be able to synthesize time clauses, and they should be able to write short paragraphs focusing on one topic. What does even the achievement of these learning outcomes by students lead to? Well, it helps, for example, in designing an assessment. How will you assess as teachers and evaluators? How are we going to assess, observe, and measure, what all these verbs are suggesting that the student should be able to do? For example, if at the end of the learning process in a semester for English as second language, if they are able to write their own job application, well, what they are doing in a job application or perhaps in writing a resume is to use all these skills, demonstrable skills suggested by the verbs that I've put in the statements and giving something that is measurable, that is quantifiable, that can be graded, that can be assessed by the teacher. This is, friends, what we call under OBE a student-centric, learner-based education. So how does one write learning outcomes? Well, the most important thing in the statement that you write about a learning outcome is the verb, and it should be an action verb. Rather than saying that my students at the end of a session must know or understand, well, use an action verb, taking one from Bloom's taxonomy, for example, the higher order verbs that suggest a higher order thinking, like create, synthesize, analyze. So your learning outcome statement or sentence must have the appropriate action verb, followed by the object of the verb, and followed by a phrase that gives the context. So in the learning outcome model that I gave you for teaching English as a second language to BA students, what is the context? The context is that students should be able to write a job application for the industry. Well, that is the context. In other words, learning takes place in such a way that not only does it produce a measurable outcome, but it also has a career prospect. Well, not always, not for all the courses, not for all the programs. Different courses and different programs will have, therefore, their own unique set of learning outcomes. But there also will be a common set of what I've been calling as what we all know as graduate attributes or 21st century competencies, which means what? The minimum of critical, the 6 C's we talk about: critical thinking, communication skills, etc., etc. Yeah, creativity, collaboration. Use only, yeah. So when one is writing, learning outcomes, then avoid using vague words, unmeasurable words like verbs like know and understand. Take the help of the Bloom's taxonomy in in specifying your learning outcome. And only one verb per learning outcome. Use friendly language. Remember that we are designing learning outcomes not for ourselves, but for our students. So as NAC and other assessment accreditation agencies expect, they keep telling us, they keep mandating higher education institutions to give the widest possible publicity and circulation of a program or a course learning outcome, which means what? That as a teacher, you are expected right in the very first session, the very first class that you take, that you need to spell out, you need to tell your students exactly what they will be able to do at the end of the course or the end of a unit, and take it lesson by lesson. Let me remind you by saying, let me remind you that we have not yet adopted the OBE model in its comprehensive detail, which engineering colleges have done, or technical colleges or professional colleges have done, where the assessment by MBA is actually to take a close look, is to evaluate the rubrics where every single course and its outcomes are evaluated in terms of what the student has learned. So learning outcomes, remember, should be observable, they should be measurable, and they should be capable of being assessed. How does framing learning outcomes improve quality of teaching? Well, it's almost a given. I don't even have to justify. Well, outcome-based education, advocates of outcome-based education say that, making expectations or outcomes explicit at the very beginning, at the start of a curriculum delivery, makes the whole process more effective and more competent for our students. Because it provides cognitive challenges, thinking challenges, the higher order thinking skills that I was saying, that is expected, that the industry expects, that the workplace or the outside world. Remember, many of us are preparing our students to make that shift from campus to corporate in a seamless manner, so that not only do they walk out of our colleges and universities with a degree to hold, with a degree in hand, but also are job ready. And this is going to be even more difficult, post-pandemic times, where how quickly in a year's time, the industry expectations from the education sector in general, and from what students ought to know, are so rapidly changing. Data analytics, for example, data management, cybersecurity, all of these new fields, information analysis, content writing, these are some of the domains that are already changing what the industry expects from graduate learners. I think I'll skip the curriculum mapping because it needs a more. These are, my concluding remarks. These are more in the nature of thoughts, things that are probably that might have occurred to you also, and things that we are thinking about, mulling about, trying to find solutions. For example, when we talk about pandemic relearning and learning outcomes, what we are looking at is look at the way in which the whole process of teaching learning for our students has changed. Look at the way in which we are also, the way in which we have been assessing. I don't have any answer, a ready-made answer to this, but these are thoughts that I leave with you, perhaps, to take back to your workplaces, and maybe as a teacher community, we can think through these questions and form solutions. For example, can learning be at the same level in COVID times as pre-COVID times? Well, certainly not. At the school level, there has already been a 20% cut in the syllabus. And there has also been a demand to further cut. So should we also be talking at the college and the university level, at least in my university level, in our own Nagpur University, this particular year is in fact a year where we have revised the syllabus, and there is a new syllabi that is being implemented. So should we therefore not have thought of maybe not diluting or not dumbing down the syllabus, but should we not have thought that given the constraints that the pandemic has created, the situation that it has created, should we not have thought of prioritizing some units per course and per program for our students, for us to teach and for our students to learn? So will it be difficult for students to achieve some learning outcomes? Probably. It is, and I'm just speculating, probably. Think about the science subjects, for example. It's been such a huge challenge for science teachers, to take their practicals onto virtual labs. So do we, therefore, at least temporarily, as an ad hoc measure, can we think of students to, prioritize some learning outcomes, not all, but some? Should teachers redesign instructional strategies? Yes, of course. How do students demonstrate higher order thinking virtually? That again is a problem. And I'll come to that in a minute. If we are trying to relearn in the time of COVID, then how do we expect our students to fulfill all the assessment criteria that they were used to in pre-COVID times? I think, friends, we are teaching and learning as a community, as an academia. We are in a crisis condition. Let us not forget that. And so the nature, content, and stakes of assessment for our students should also reflect and be appropriate to the crisis condition. So my suggestion, therefore, is, one must reduce expectations of what and how much students can learn. Students that the extent and the level of learning that we could expect from our students maybe in 2019 cannot surely be the same as in 2020. So let's keep the stakes of assessment low, but let our students not be called COVID graduates or COVID postgraduates. That is such an unfortunate, such a degrading label. The second thing that I would suggest is, let us prioritize formative assessment over summative assessment. I mean, the default option that many of our universities and colleges we have done is that we have included the MCQ test as the default option. But then setting a good MCQ as an assessment tool is a skill, and most teachers needed to be trained in this mode of questioning. Setting MCQs is not simply providing 4 or 5 options to students with one unambiguous answer. No. It also means that, the options that we choose in our MCQs must be close enough to test the student's ability to think critically rather than to simply, um, uh, give the right answer by guesswork. So as teachers, we have been, and we need to prepare question banks of large number of MCQs of graded difficulty in order to challenge our students' intelligence and not simply memory. Everything that, that we have been doing for years has undergone a 360-degree transformation. And in these COVID times, when we are trying our best to deliver our courses and support our students, we need to be creative, we need to be innovative. But having said that, we also need to be cautious that we do not go overboard with our own creativity in pushing technology-driven pedagogy at a speed faster than what our learners can take. Let's keep the learners' interest uppermost in our mind. Because, look at the learners, given the diversity of our learners and their uneven access to the internet, the poor internet penetration into the rural areas, should suggest that if we want to embrace technology and make it a part of our new normal in the education system, let us do it in a graded manner. Otherwise, it might make our education an education with an E, which denotes not merely electronic, but E, which stands for elitist and exclusionary. Let it also not be said of our students that they are COVID graduates or COVID postgraduates. We must remember that if in the best times of our education, in our best times, if education has been far from perfect, then in these worst times, it is all right if we cannot be perfect. So the need of the hour, I feel, is that we learn to relearn in the time of COVID. Yes, you might say that it is true that, it is easier to reinvent oneself as a teacher when one is 30, which I'm not, rather than when one is 50, which I am. But the algorithms of the new normal makes it imperative for all of us to change. So we can and we must relearn our old ways of teaching and learn new ones so that our students can have brighter and better futures. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir, for edifying us with your knowledge, through which I'm sure the audience got a better perspective about the challenges in the outcome-based education which we have to face because of this pandemic and how to overcome them. Your deliberations and your pristine expertise on the topic discoursed substantiated our understanding. And we do understand that we need to broaden our perspectives and take an imperative action plan. Sir, our viewers have some questions related to this topic. With your permission, may I forward them to you?
Yeah, I'd love to take those questions.
Yes, sir. Okay, so the first one is, sir, there are pedagogical advantages of online learning, period. Rather, we are seeing a shift into hybrid online and in-person model being materialized. Viewers would like to know your opinions and suggestions on the challenges that we may face.
Well, I think I did touch upon this point when I said that, in my very introductory remarks, I said that in the ongoing pandemic situation that we are in, we have already shifted from what is called blended. What the questioner is asking is calls it hybrid. Well, blended learning or blended teaching, which essentially is a combination of traditional chalk and talk method of delivering the curriculum with technology-enabled curriculum. But I suggest what we are experiencing is that we are progressively moving away from even blended teaching to flip teaching. And flip teaching, I always believe that we must, give students as much space and opportunity to turn our classroom interactions not into information sharing, but questioning. I remember, the famous atomic scientist Niels Bohr, who won the Nobel Prize. He once was asked after winning the Nobel Prize he was programmed to do. Virtual and digital platforms do not allow the kind of high touch that only a teacher can impart to high tech. And that is, what a teacher, I'm sure this is what we have been missing most, our ability to establish a rapport, our ability to connect with our students, not on virtual platforms, but physically to be able to see that what we are telling them and what we are teaching them is registering with that sparkle in their eyes, with a twinkle of a smile, etc. You're not audible, Sonika.
Sorry, sir. We are flooded with many questions, but because of the time constraint, I would like to forward one last question to you, sir. Please guide us about how to overcome challenges in online learning, which you mentioned in your talk. But successful in all our endeavors. With this, I would now like to propose a formal vote of thanks. I would like to thank our management and respected principal, Dr. K.T. Thomas, who acknowledged the need of this faculty development program. I would like to thank the members of the organizing committee who guided and shaped this program, and a special thanks to all our viewers who stayed connected with us today. A special notice to the viewers who are watching us through YouTube Live and Google Meet. The feedback link has been provided in the YouTube channel chat box and the Google Meet chat box. Please fill in the feedback form and let us know your views on today's session. Thank you, one and all. We will meet tomorrow for yet another interesting session on the topic Effective Mentoring of Students by Dr. Shrikant Prabhu. Till then, Take care, stay safe, and do wear a mask. Thank you.
And all the best to the participants. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.